How's it going, YouTube? My name is Ninja7, your resident Mistweaver Monk and favorite WoW healing content creator. And guys, today we're going to be making a quick video kind of going over some of the pros and cons that each of the healing specs have in 10.2. Now, this isn't going to be your typical which healer should you main video. I do want to make one of those in a few days, later down the line. But this is specifically going to be taking a look at the Mythic Plus performance of each spec and what are your pain points and what are your strong points. I think that this video will go very well alongside those style videos to help you make your decision, just so you know coming into the tier, what am I going to struggle with if I pick this spec throughout the tier? What am I hoping gets changed or fixed or reworked? And then what am I going to be good at? What should I focus on and play around? And what will this spec just play like in general? So that's what we're going to be doing today, and I hope that you guys enjoy it. I've tested every single one of the healer specs at every single key level that I can push. I've done at least 2+20s on each healer, up to about 15 to 20 on my Mistweaver, but I've really been putting in the hours trying to grind out this video for you guys and really get comfortable with each healer. And let's go and jump into it, and let's start off with Shaman. So starting off with the pros of Shaman, Shamans have always kind of been, great Swiss Army knives in Mythic Plus. So the number one pro that you have as a shaman is you still have excellent utility. You can really control mobs and feel like you're actually playing a single player game when you play Mythic Plus because of how much control you have as a shaman, and you still have that coming in 10.2. Also, another major plus is in a world where they're trying to kind of gear every healer to be like spot healers. Shaman already does that. They already excel at that, and they still do. So they have very strong spot healing, which is very good and very valuable in a Mythic Plus world, because if you're spot healing one person, fully top them up in one global cooldown, then that is a fifth of your whole group that you need to heal. Whereas like in raid, it's a lot less valuable because it's only 5% of the whole group. So their spot healing, they are the lords of that because they have the chunkiest, fattest spot heals. Now, they did receive some nerfs to some of their AoE healing to compensate for that, but the AoE healing isn't really that as important in Mythic Plus as it is in Raid. However, now that they've buffed Chain Heal back, it is actually such a good button. That is just another pro that they have, is they have an off cooldown button that can just top up a group. Now, yes, you do have to wait like 8 seconds or 16 seconds if you want to rapid fire 2 chain heals off for maximum value. However, just when you press this button, it now has such a great impact. And if everyone's taking major damage, you don't have to wait on your cooldowns. You can just rapid fire machine gun 2 chain heals, and it feels just like it did when they first reworked all these talents, making their chain heal build very good. Now that brings us to the main con of Shaman, and it's the only con we're really going to talk about, and that is that the mana cost of Chain Heal is absolutely, it's really absurd. It is 14,000, which on paper doesn't sound that bad, but like I said, about every 16 seconds, give or take, you're going to want to rapid fire 2 of them. That's 28,000 mana to just top people up, just to top the group up. It's a lot of mana, and it adds up very quickly. So if you choose to go with the Chain Heal playstyle, which if you're playing Shaman, in my opinion, you should, because the Chain Heal build is just the most fun way to play Shaman, then you're gonna be kind of punished, whereas some of these other healers do not even think or worry about mana. So in this sense, this is probably the worst con to have if you're just picking up any of the healers. As a new player, as a new healer, or being new to a spec, the last thing that you want to think about is your mana consumption. You want to have the freedom to try out everything and get used to all your buttons, and the cost of Chain Heal is just absolutely ridiculous, and really makes you have to stop and drink more than most of the healers on this list, if not all of them. So that's kind of what I have experienced throughout my testing as Shaman. And then if I had to add one more con, I guess I would say that their tier set is a little lackluster in a Mythic Plus environment, but understanding just how much value you could technically get in a raid environment from this, it makes sense at being at the level that it is at. But let's go and move on to Evoker. So Preservation Evoker. Now, I know that this video is talking about Mythic Plus specifically. However, we've seen Evoker's throughput kind of being through the roof overall in the raid testing. However, let's go ahead and talk about their pros. So first up, the first thing that I noticed, even the very first key that I ran as an Evoker, their tier set is absolutely insane. I mean, if you think about how powerful temporal anomaly has been for them in the past, their tier set is basically just that baked in to all of their empowered abilities. So if you dream breath, you're living flaming your allies. So that's just a bigger chunk heal on top of your dream breath that can also have a chance to apply some amount of echoes. I mean, just the amount of echoes that you get for free from pressing your normal buttons in your normal rotations, it felt insane, and it just extended the power of things like, I'm just going to use your dream breath as an example. Already before, your dream breath was really powerful. I mean, you could spread a couple of echoes and then dream breath and just get big AoE heals. But it doesn't stop there, because those AoE heals come with living flames that then could come with more echoes. I mean, it really felt fluid, which is going to bring me to my next pro for Preservation Evoker, and that's just the play style feels so fluid, because by the time that you're done kind of abusing and using all the echoes and just the rotation of your dream breath, your spirit blooms up, and you do the same thing for that, because it works with all of your empowered spells. And so you can kind of get in this rotation that just plays itself out and feels very fluid, because it's you just play around. Did I get some echoes? Okay, what button do I have ready to use them? Okay, I used them. Now let's press dream breath. And then you use those echoes and you're like, okay, spirit bloom's back up. Let's press that. And it just feels really good. And there was a lot of times that I would sit there at full essence and I'd have both of my little essence, I think burst is what it's called, procs ready, and I just didn't have time to use them because I was having so much fun just cycling between my empowered spells and then doing my damage rotation, which brings me to my next point. Outside of your cooldowns, since your 30-second, like 20-second cooldowns are so strong, you can squeeze in a lot of damage in the meantime. And evokers are kind of known for having some very hard hitting, some very big damage AoE spells in Fire Breath and Deep Breath, and those only get better because Fire Breath now comes with its own little mini living flames from your tier set as well. So all in all, just huge damage that you can see from this class with not much shift in playstyle. If anything, the only way that you're shifting in your playstyle is just not pressing heal spells as often, because you're just getting them for free basically. Like in the old playstyle, you could cast a temporal anomaly, whereas with this playstyle, you don't really have to, because you're already getting those echoes for free. So all in all, huge damage. And then I've kind of hinted at it, but the next pro is you just have a ton of cooldowns. I mean, you can cycle so many cooldowns and they're all super powerful, especially stasis. I mean, this button feels insane because of how insane I've talked about Dream Breath being just now, and Spirit Bloom and all that stuff being so powerful. Well, what if you got to do it again? Like, stasis is so good because you just get to do everything twice. I mean, it feels so good. It feels so powerful, and it's very rewarding in a fluid playstyle. And then talk about one of the cons from Shaman being their mana consumption. Well, Evoker, I mean, if you're watching the gameplay that's on the screen right now, I feel like every time I looked at my mana bar, I was at like 98%. And I was like, how is this possible? I am casting so many spells constantly. How am I full mana? I can't explain how great their mana consumption is. Like, they don't even have to think about mana as a resource like some of the other healers do right now. And it's kind of, well, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to say anything further about that, but their mana feels a little too good. Like, you don't even have to think about it, for example. But you know what? I'll stop kissing the feet of all you Evoker players, and I'll start talking about the cons. What are the cons of this class? It kind of sounds like I'm talking about 10.1.7 Paladin right now with all of these pros, but let's just jump into the cons. So first up is their safety. Now, they're not the least tanky class on this list. They're not. However, one of their major spot heals, Verdant Embrace, causes them to just, they basically dash to one of your allies to heal them. So it's just a little risky about misplacing yourself. So if you accidentally dash on them as they're taking a pounding from like a swirly or a dot, I mean, one of your biggest spot heals, healing on a dot and then putting you in the dot if it's like an AoE dot, like, I mean, things like that can just cause you to take unnecessary damage. So it just feels like you're a little unsafe as this class. And then on top of that, you do slightly have a couple of like limited defensives. You don't have the strongest defensives of all the healers, but you also don't have the weakest. And then again, you do have a tank external and time dilation. I guess I'll call it a tank external. It's not necessarily a mitigation, it just delays the damage. But you could apply that to yourself and give all of your ginormous throughput numbers a chance to just top yourself off before all the damage hits you. So it's kind of hard to pick out cons really, but these are the main concerns. Is there were some times where I would just die because I just fly to an ally and just die to what they were standing in. I mean, it kind of sucks that you can't turn that part off of Verdant Embrace. At least I haven't found a way. Maybe there is. I don't know. Maybe I should like main this spec for a tier and find out. But yeah, those are the cons that I found for Evoker. And while I was playing them, there were just a lot of times where I feel like I would die in a part where it's like, do I just let my ally die? You know? Anyways, let's go and move on to Druids. So Druids have seen a lot of changes recently, and a lot of those are around their Grove Guardians. Branching off of that, no pun intended, let's go and talk about some of their pros. And the number one that I've got to mention is Grove Guardians. Now, to not sound cliche and to also not sound like this is a job interview, some of the Druids pros are also their cons. Like, my strengths are my weaknesses. I'm sure if you've done a job interview, you've said that before in your life. Don't lie. But the Grove Guardians are so powerful. They really are. It's so great when you have all three charges available. You can kind of just let them do a mechanic and then you do the damage or something, or like help them heal. It feels like they're the main character and you're just their pet, you know what I mean? But it's very powerful. However, I'm going to kind of double dip in the cons a bit. It's very Guardians or Grove Guardians centric. And if you don't like that playstyle, that pet playstyle, or summon them and then like you can like just go AFK, eat some Cheetos while they do the healing. If you don't like that, then this isn't going to be the best tier for you. So it could be a con there. However, it's not quite like that. It's easy to kind of draw a line between Grove Guardians and the Monk's Shadowlands ability called Fallen Order, where you would summon a monk and they literally would do almost all the healing for you. Grove Guardians aren't quite that powerful. However, they are very strong to a point where it's fun to play around them. I mean, I have a ton of fun playing with these guys, like I used to have fun playing Fallen Order back in Shadowlands. However, I could understand if you just don't like that playstyle, if you don't like having those guys help you with the healing, then this just would not be fun. However, even then, their healing is just very good. It's very fun. I mean, they have some of the most engaging healing to do because you have to manage hots on multiple targets to make it AoE healing, or if you just have if you focus all of your hots on one target, it's just great for spot healing. So let's get back to the pros, and I'm going to talk about their tank healing. So this is one of the things that I have always loved about Resto Druid. Resto Druid was the thing that I started playing when I first started playing WoW, and it's something that I noticed that was very unique, and it's even more so now in Dragonflight than it ever has been, and that's just the strength of their tank healing. I mean, your hots are technically, you could call them single target heals. You could argue they're AoE heals, like Reju, for example. Yes, it's a single target hot, but you can put it on 20 people in a raid. Like, let's be real, you do have the time. But in terms of their tank healing, the tank is healed by how many hots you have on them. And right now, I mean, you can get so many hots on them. You'll have your life bloom on them, which will count your mastery, 2 extra times. And then Your rejuve, you'll have 1 or 2 stacks on them depending if you take germination, and then you can have your adaptive swarm on them. Your Cenarian ward is just a disgusting hot, and all of these hots, and there are more, there are even more hots that you can have on them. All of these hots are going to be ticking super fast because you're going to take liveliness, which doesn't make them tick or go away faster. It just makes them tick faster. So your spot healing, you're just going to see 1,000 little numbers just rolling on your tank. And it's just very satisfying because as long as you apply your hots to your tank, you've done your job in the tank healing. If they die, it is on them. And you just can do so much single target healing. However, with that being said, going back to that like job interview style, thing, that strength of their spot healing being super strong, as long as you can apply all of your hots, as the damage comes out or before the damage comes out, it's also kind of a weakness. Because one thing that I noticed is whenever you come up to a mechanic and you know that a random ally is going to get chosen for like a dot, for example. So there's consistent damage on a random target. That's going to be the title of this con. Consistent damage on a random target. It's one thing when it's on the tank. If your tank pool's big, they're going to take a lot of damage. You can pre-apply all of your hots to them, Swiftmen to extend them with Verdant Infusion. You can do that, and you can, reliably do that. However, if you come up to a pack that you know is about to just truck one of your allies, it's hard to know how to heal them. It's really hard to kind of figure out that rotation, and that is a big weakness because if you don't know who to pre-apply, say that you're in that world where you're coming up to that pack and think that damage is about to come out, you can pre-apply rejuves to all 5 targets or all 5 allies. You can wild growth right before that damage hits, and then once that target is selected, you can then put your Life Bloom and your Cenarian Ward on that ally, and then they'll be super safe. You can even spam regrowths at that point, or Grove Guardians heal them. However, it's just the fact that you have to kind of do all that pre-application to all the allies that didn't get selected. It kind of just seems like a waste. So what really happens is you end up just pre-applying a wild growth because you're fine to waste that global cooldown, and then you just rejuve or make sure that you reapply rejuve, and then all of your other hots as it's selected. So it just feels weird. It kind of sounds, now that I'm saying it out loud, it's so hard to explain, but once you get in there and actually play with it, it just feels like you're lacking something. Unless you have Nature Swiftness and Swiftmend available, it just feels like you're missing one tool, like one instant spot heal button that you can press. I don't know, Nourish, all these tree ants that you're going to be spawning are going to be spamming Nourish, which that will help out. And that really does kind of help this con not become a con anymore. However, it still is. It just is. And it's, from my play experience, that is one of the things that I noticed I was struggling with. And no matter how much I tried to, pre-apply or just get prepped for those instances, they just happen. I mean, people take random spurts of damage, and it feels like Druid, the hot play style, it kind of lacks in today's like bursty damage world where multiple big slaps of damage can hit you all right in quick succession. But let's go ahead and move on to Monk. Now, Monk has seen a ton of changes since, when's the last time that you remember that Monk was kind of just not looked at for a patch? Like, it feels like we're always getting slightly tweaked here or there, brought up 2 steps, brought down 1 step, brought up 1 step, brought down 2 steps. But right now in 10.2, we're in such a great spot. We really are. They've taken a look and isolated our weaknesses, and really you can tell that they are trying to fix those or correct those, and it shows, and it really has shown in play. So let's go and start off with the pros. We're super resilient now. I don't want to say tanky because it's kind of hard to say we are super tanky now. It's not like we just have 50% extra damage mitigation like Paladins do, or did, I guess, at one point. However, with the change to Expel Harm and Bounce Back, now Bounce Back kind of working well with our healing elixir, and just extra passive mitigation through, I think, calming presence is what it's called. All of those things stack up and just give us a lot more survivability, something that we needed, something we struggled with. And we really, or at least in my experience, I just don't die to things anymore. Like, I feel like I used to die to the stupidest things. Like, if I just took a slap from like a spiteful ad, it would kill me. Whereas now it's not as punishing on yourself if you don't prioritize healing yourself over your allies when everyone's taking a big, chunky damage. Like if a boss mechanic is going off, you can spot heal around to everyone who needs healing instead of just like prio healing yourself, which it always sucked to have to do in some instances. But now you're just super tanky. You don't die to just random crap anymore, so it feels great. And what else feels good is your damage. Now, you can get a lot of damage off in every single environment. Like, so in a big AoE pack, you spinning crank kick spam, you get off a fat Zen pulse. It feels great, but it feels really good right now. In 3 target or 4 target or 2 target, 1 target cleave, you can get fat damage. The buff to Rising Sunkick really helped those instances and kind of brought us back more in line on boss damage. So our damage is actually in a great spot right now. It's not at the top. You're not going to do more damage than every other healer, but you're going to be able to do competitive damage with all the other healers while still having a lot of things that you do better than them. And one of those things that you can do very well now is your spot healing. Now, the spot healing has seen so many buffs to like Soothing Mist, Enveloping Mist, and most notably Vivify, and now all of it feels so impactful. So if I Soothing Mist spam the tank and spam Vivifies onto them, I see their health bar move just more than it would before. I have to spend less global cooldowns topping up a single target with those spells so that I can get back to the normal rotation of, Blackout Kick, Rising Sun Kick, the normal monk spells. I can get back immersed into Mistweaver playstyle instead of having to spend so much time just, casting into one target hoping to heal them up. And then on top of that, your AoE healing in Mythic Plus environments has actually gotten better. I feel like you're one of the only healers where that's true because your Invigorating Mist, your cleave healing on your Renewing Mist targets has gotten even better. And your tier set is very good for just added spot healing. I mean, you'll see just like 30k heal pops for free. I mean, literally for free because your rapid diffusion applies those. So it just feels so good right now. And then on top of all of that, you still have the major bonus and the major pro to playing Mistweaver of having excellent cooldowns. You have such good cooldowns ever since they added in Sheilun's Gift and then added Legacy of Wisdom to make it an actual, viable, good Mythic Plus spell. Mistweaver has just been in this like golden period of Mythic Plus cooldown rotation where you can rotate a 40-second recharge Sheilun's Gift that tops up everyone almost always, and a Chi-Ji, which once you get that Chi-Ji rotation down, it is one of the strongest throughput abilities in Mythic Plus across all healers. So you just can cycle that 1 minute and 40-second cooldown, and they're both just so impactful in 5-man environments that it's such a pro to playing Mistweaver. Once you get those spells down, how to use them, how to rotate them, you just feel like you can handle almost every bit of damage that comes your way. And on top of all of that, you'll be able to survive that damage now because of all the extra resiliency. But now let's move on to the cons of playing Monk. So what are the downsides, the pain points of playing Monk? There aren't any. You should play Monk. It's the perfect spec. Okay, maybe not. However, it does kind of feel a little repetitive at a point. I've seen this, echoed throughout the community because, I see a lot of feedback for the Mistweaver community. And one thing that a lot of people don't appreciate is the Feline Stomp playstyle of specifically spinning Crane Kick. Because when you're on like a 1 to 2 or 3 target cleave, your rotation is pretty, dynamic. It can change on if you get a Rising Sun Kick reset, if you need to do priority damage, or if you need to cleave evenly. Like, it can change and it's very dynamic. However, at 4+ targets, your rotation does feel pretty lackluster because in most cases it's just spinning crank kick spam. So a lot of people don't enjoy that aspect. However, just seeing all those numbers can be enjoyable to most, myself included. That's why I love this spec. Also, I will say, if you're someone who does not like that about Mist, that nowadays there are more variables in that question of when should I start spinning crank kick, at what, target cap, or at, 4+ targets should I spinning crank kick spam, or is it 5+? There are a lot more variables and a lot of variations to that answer nowadays, since our tier set gets a lot of value if we are weaving in rising sun kicks into the spinning crank kick spam, or if maybe now those procs of chi harmony that you're getting are more worth it than just spinning crank kicking at 5 targets, or maybe even 6 targets. Maybe we should still do that single target or 3 target cleave rotation in those instances. Or what if there's a single target in a big pack that we should focus down that has more health and does more damage to us than every other pack? Then should we still do the spinning crank kick spam, or should we not? So what I'm trying to say is the tier set has kind of added a few more question marks at the end of that question. So if you're someone who who has had that sentiment in the past of spinning crank kick spam is just not for me, then maybe now is your time to play the class, because that could be a pro for you, is that has in a way changed. It at least has become more of a question. Is it as sure as I should spinning crank kick right now and just spam that button, or is there more merit to doing the rising sun kick rotation? So that's going to do it for monks. Look, I'm sorry if I sound biased, but that is the class that I play and the class that I tested the most. And so far, the changes feel so good that it's kind of hard to think of any cons that we have in the time other than the ones listed with spinning crank kick. But I will say, though, there is another con where at like 4 or 5 targets, or sometimes even 6 targets, spinning crank kick still does seem a little lackluster right now, because it doesn't feel like it's scaled right. Like in a major AoE pack, you can do like 80k damage. Like you can do good DPS on large packs. But what about those like mid-sized pools where you're still supposed to spinning crank kick, but it's just not a massive amount of packs or mobs? It just feels like it could be scaled higher for those smaller large pools, if that makes sense. But that's okay. I've talked about monks enough. Let's go and move on. And let's go and talk about the pink Mistweavers, the Paladins. So the pros to Holy Paladin, well, it still feels like 10.1 Paladin. I'll just be completely honest. As someone who comes from a Mistweaver and plays the Paladin, whenever I would do that on the live servers, it would feel like I was playing a different game. Like it really would, because Paladin was so much stronger than Mistweavers. Well, nowadays that gap is closed, or closing at least. But Paladin just feels like a Swiss Army knife. It still does. I mean, this is a pro that they've had for so long, specifically in Mythic Plus. They just bring so much to the table. They have so many different cooldowns that accomplish different things that you can kind of just pick and choose which cooldown is best in any given moment. And since you still have just as many impactful cooldowns, maybe you could argue that your Prism is weaker, since your tier set doesn't modify it. But your Daybreak being on a shorter cooldown kind of fixes that. In a 6 cooldown rotation, when you have 6 major cooldowns to work with, taking one away, now you still have 5. They're all on pretty short cooldowns, and making one of them an even shorter cooldown, it's kind of like you don't miss that 6th button. So they are just a Swiss Army knife, and all the utility they bring, all the cooldowns that they have. Yeah, I mean, the utility that you bring so much tankiness, not just to yourself. You're still pretty tanky. Yes, they've taken a lot of shots or a lot of nerfs to the tankiness that they themselves have. However, whenever you holy shock your allies, they're just inherently getting tankier, and you're holy shock spamming so much. You also have Aura Mastery that makes everyone tankier. So people are going to be taking a lot less damage than if you just brought another healer. And then on top of that, your throughput just feels very good. I mean, just being a spot healing class, I talked about it in the Shaman section. It's better in Mythic Plus than it is in Raid for the most part, just due to how the numbers work. However, being a shock heal class in Paladin, where you have Word of Glory and Holy Shock, and then I guess technically Lay on Hands, where you can instantly top someone up, it's kind of like you just shrug off the damage. You just heal it as it comes out, and it just feels insane. You have your beacons on your two squishiest people, just adding more effective health to them too. I mean, it just this class just it feels like they still have all the strengths. They're less strong than they were in 10.1.7. However, they still have those strengths, and it feels like you can do anything. You can handle whatever the dungeon throws at you. And then on top of that, they still do pretty good damage. It's not what it used to be. It's not, as insane as it was last tier. However, just the added dots that your holy shocks apply now from your tier set just are pretty nice. I mean, it just adds a little bit more damage. And then the added hots that those holy shocks are adding as well. The quicker cooldown of daybreak, which is so good. I mean, those spamming holy shocks whenever after you daybreak and it 3-hits someone, you can get so much healing from that 40-second cooldown or 45-second cooldown that now you just have more globals that you can spend on damaging spells. You can spend more holy shocks on doing damage than you used to because you just do so much healing from your new tier set. But let's go and talk about the cons. Now, for a class like Paladin, like these Swiss Army knife classes, I feel like it's just hard to find a con for them because, like I said, they can handle whatever you throw at them because they have so many tools on their belt. But I'll try as hard as I can to pick what I figured out as to be my biggest pain point, and that is also just like Shaman. I would say it was the mana. Since Daybreak is now a shorter cooldown from your tier set, they did kind of nerf how much mana it gave back to you. You don't see your mana bar jump quite as much as it used to. However, if you chain pull, which Paladin is great for chain pulling because, like I said, you just always have a cooldown available. If your group is chain pulling, it can be kind of straining on the mana. From what I noticed, I feel like Paladin and Shaman were the two classes, funnily enough, since they're designed for Mythic Plus, that I would have to stop and drink for mana on the most. And I do think, like I said, if your class is gonna have a problem or a major con, the two worst ones that your class can have are just being squishy, like just dying, because new players aren't gonna enjoy dying, or if your mana, problems are bad. And because if a new player picks up Paladin, wants to learn Paladin, like I said on the Shaman section, the last thing that you're going to want to worry about is your mana. Now, am I doing something wrong? Probably. So if I am doing something wrong, then just take this section as Paladin feels pretty good still. So there you go. Those are the cons to Paladin, or that is the con to Paladin that I noticed. And then let's go and move on to the final section, and it is the priest hour, guys. It is holy and disc priest. Now, I'm not going to talk about them as a clump too much, but it's worth noting that when you talk about one priest spec, you're kind of talking about the other one too. Because if I chose to main holy priest, for example, I'm still kind of in a way maining disc priest since they're both priest. If I get gear, if every week I slam 8 vault keys and get a max vault for my priest, I'm still going to be cleaving that value onto the other priest spec. So with priest, a pro for both of them is that any given priest spec or either of the priest specs is only as weak as the stronger of the two. If Holy Priest is the worst class in the game and Disc Priest is the best, then Holy Priest is technically the best in the game because you could just, swap your talents, swap your spec to Disc Priest. Now, I know that that's like a super roundabout way and it's not like totally accurate, but you guys hopefully understand what I'm saying. It is each priest spec is only as weak as the strongest of the two. But let's go and jump into each one individually. That way, gotta show some love for the Holy Priest, even though Disc Priest just got a rework. So let's go and start off Priest Hour with Holy Priest. Guys, the number one pro here is one that I put in all bold. It's such a massive pro for Holy Priests. Their tier set is disgusting. It felt so powerful. I mean, if you think about all throughout Dragonflight, yes, Holy Priest has felt lacking. Like one of the main question marks is their damage. This doesn't fix their damage at all. However, another big question mark that they've had is just their cooldowns. Their buttons just didn't feel great or very well designed for Mythic Plus. The things that did feel good are their holy words, but they're just on such low or long cooldowns, you can't really cycle them. And then even then, Sanctify was kind of like, eh. It didn't really help their Mythic Plus when it got nerfed for their raid, viability. However, this tier set is so strong. What it does, if you haven't read it, is that it basically all of your renew, like whenever your renew hots tick, it gives you a chance of the next holy word that you use, your sanctity or serenity, will just not go on cooldown. And so when you have a massive spot heal or a pretty nice AoE grounded spell, and those just don't go on cooldown, you don't have to wait a minute, or I guess shorter than a minute, because those cooldowns do slightly reset. When you can just completely top up 2 people because your serenity did not go on cooldown, it feels so insane. And if you remember, for those of you who have watched this channel for a long time, one thing that I said, back in season 1, if they wanted to fix Holy Priest, make serenity hit 2 people. And it kind of does that. Because now if your serenity, if you do get that proc and your serenity does not go on cooldown, now it's healing 40% of your group. Your 40% of your group is fully topped up. And then as the spot healing spec Holy Priest yourself, your heals and flash heals, which are very powerful, will heal up the other 3 with no problem. Now they don't have to heal 4 people completely. You just have to heal 3 people. And to top all of that off, you can get in an instance, which I did a couple times, where after that, after my serenity didn't get reset, or did get reset, and I spot healed 2 people to full, then my sanctity got reset. So I got to heal all 3 of those people to full, basically, like very easily. I mean, this tier set feels so strong. And then on top of that, say that you're in a pinch and you don't get the reset that you need in order to survive a mechanic, or you do get it and you just need more power on top of that. Apotheosis, or however you're supposed to say this, feels so incredible with the tier set. It basically just resets all of your holy words. So both of those plus your, I think it's called Chastise, the stun, the single target hit. It resets those cooldowns, then makes them a little stronger. So it just works so well. This tier set fit perfectly in the play style that you wanted as a holy priest. So although they don't really have the strongest major cooldowns like Symbol of Hope, Divine Hymn, those aren't, insane in Mythic Plus like they kind of are in Raid. It doesn't really matter because you have a 2-minute cooldown that is super powerful with Apotheosis. And then these shorter cooldowns, it's hard to say exactly what their average cooldown is, but in Sanctity and Serenity, that just do a ton of healing. And then outside of that, you're just a machine gun flash healer, flash heal, heal, flash heal, heal. And everyone's topped up. Also on top of all that, your holy words also apply renew. I didn't even mention this, but your 2 set makes your holy words apply renew as well. So those renews that you're getting for free for casting your holy words have a chance to make your holy words not, cost or go on cooldown. So it just it creates this cycle, this loop that you can get in. It's not like an infinite loop, but it feels insane. Like you'll get just chain resets from it. It just feels very good. And all of the holy word synergies are just that much stronger now with this tier set. However, let's go ahead and talk about the cons. Now, notice how all of the pros were about the tier set. Now, I've heard people say, should there be that much power in the tier set? I think Mad Skills said that he got like 68 procs in 1 dungeon. Should the tier set be that strong? Should they be that reliant on the tier set? You could argue that if you don't enjoy that playstyle, you won't enjoy Holy Priest this tier. So that could be a con for you. You're going to have to ask that question to yourself. However, the overall cons for Holy Priest that I noticed were that you're just lacking utility. And one of those things is just damage. Damage I see from a healer. Healer damage is utility. You're just adding, or you're taking stress. You're relieving some damage that has to be done from your DPS players. And that's not necessarily fixed here. However, I will say the damage did surprise me. You do more damage than I thought you did, but outside of just damage, you lack utility. And why did I bring up damage and utility in the same token? It is because as a priest, you do have PI. So from what damage you're not doing, you are adding that to another DPS player, sure, and that kind of goes really well with Augmentation Evoker right now. But anyways, yeah, you just lack like an AoE stun. You do have your Scream that can be an AoE, I think Disorient is what it is, but you don't have a kick. I mean, you lack a lot. And if you're gonna lack something like utility in a dungeon, I feel like that's the one thing that you don't want to lack as a Mythic Plus player. And then on top of that is that you don't have like a short or like a very easy to use tank defense. You do have GS or Guardian Spirit, which makes them take more healing from you. However, I feel like if you want a spec to push like super high keys, adding healing to what you can do to a tank or just making them take more healing from you is not as good as making them take less damage, because things still one-shot tanks, or they can one-shot a tank, or they could take too much damage, and just them taking more healing from you, it's not the same. So lacking a good tank defensive, like, I don't know, like a Bark Skin or even Life Cocoon nowadays, I mean, it's such a massive shield. It does extend their health bar, whereas Guardian Spirit only extends their health bar to things that wouldn't kill them. I mean, look, I know Guardian Spirit could technically revive them, and if they're gonna die with it on them, they just pop back up at 40% health. But it's not the same. It's not the same, and it felt lacking as the Holy Priest player. I just felt like I wish I could help my tank out a little bit more than I can right now. And those are the cons. And one thing that you'll notice is those kind of are the strengths of a Disc Priest. So let's go ahead and talk about Disc Priest now to wrap up the video. And first up, the number one pro is, like I said, tank protection. You have 2 charges of pain suppression, which I'm pretty sure is a 40-second, or I'm sorry, a 40% DR that you can put on your tank. You can even put it on yourself to make yourself tankier or a DPS, but like a very strong tank defensive just at your disposal. And then on top of that, you have barrier, which if you need barrier in a pinch, it did get slightly nerfed down to 20%, but just giving your whole party or whoever can stand in it 20% mitigation, your tank included. I mean, you can kind of cycle that on as a tank cooldown if you really need to, but your tank protection felt absolutely insane. And your power word shields do technically extend your tank's effective health bar, and it just felt really good. And on top of that, you are giving mitigation, at least I think it's 3% mitigation to anyone with atonement on them, and as the tank, they will always have atonement on them. So you felt like you were helping your tank more than you were as a holy counterpart. And then outside of tank protection, another pro for playing Disc Priest is that your penance, one of your coolest spells, feels so good. I mean, the amount of different ways that you can buff this spell feels so good, and it just feels even better than it did in 10.1.7. It felt so impactful every single time that I pressed it, and I was thinking more now that I don't have to focus as much on Twilight Equilibrium as I was back in 10.1.7. I can focus more on just buffing my next penance, and then I always had a max powered penance ready to go whenever I needed to. And then the biggest pro that you guys are probably just expecting is Uppies. Uppies is so insane. I mean, Ultimate Penitence is probably the coolest ability they've added into the game since I've started playing. And just the fact that people are calling it Uppies makes me so happy. But this is probably, if you were to ask me, this is the best cooldown in the game for healers for Mythic Plus. Why? Why is it like that? Does it do the most healing? I don't think so. I mean, it felt like it did a lot of healing, but it didn't feel like it did the most healing of all the cooldowns. But what it did well was honestly damage. I mean, if you did Power Word Radiance and then went up into Uppies, you know that everyone's going to be alive, hopefully, unless they stand in like a swirly. That's their fault. Let's be real. But they're going to live through almost any amount of damage. So you can apply Radiance, go up in Uppies. You know everyone's safe. You could even go downstairs, refill your water, come back up. Everyone's still alive. And somehow you're doing better than tank damage while up in the sky, basically AFK. Like, I think I like sneezed twice and then looked back at the meters and I had passed like the lowest DPS in the tank on the meters. I mean, it does so much damage. And that is the next pro, is that Disc Priest right now is just doing a ton of damage. I said it before, Uppies does, just a metric ton of damage for a healer cooldown. However, outside of that I think it's 3-minute cooldown. Outside of that, you still do insane damage. I mean, they haven't lost anything in terms of their damage. They utilize Rhapsody better than Holy Priest, which I feel like that's criminal. They also just gain a lot of power from their new schism being baked into the Mind Blast, and their Shadow Fiend. Like they gain so much damage if you execute the rotation well, which you should be. And being a battle healer, a healer that does their healing based on their damage, just allows you more globals to focus on damage. And like I said, Penance, it felt very good, not just on healing, how much healing it can apply through Atonement, but also the amount of single target damage that it does to a focused target or to a boss. It just feels like you do more damage than almost every other healer. Maybe I would say in my testing, it was them and Evoker that did probably the most damage. I might be missing one, or I might just, I'm not the best at healer damage, but those did feel very easy to do very well on damage charts. Now, what are the cons? And the two biggest cons are pretty big. I'll go ahead and say it. So they did get a rework. They tried to simplify their rotation, their ramp, where you apply your atonements and then you apply all these buffs to yourself, and then you can start doing damage and finally capitalizing on those atonements. They tried to mitigate that. However, we just came from a tier where your tier set made your power word radiance instant, or at least you had a chance for it to be instant. So that losing that, but then gaining more on the back end of your ramp, more simplification or less globals that you have to, sequence and order correctly. It kind of canceled out what they were going for with the whole change to, baking in all these things into other things like Shadow Covenant and your Shadow Fiend are the same now. Mind Blast and Schism are baked together now. But all that time that you're saving in your ramp, you're still hard casting power word radiances. That did feel noticeable, and I will also say another major plus to having instant radiances was that you could use them on the move. If you need to AoE heal and AoE reapply atonement while on the move, you're kind of screwed. You kind of just have to renew spam or power word shield and pray. Like it feels like you're missing a lot from your old tier set. So it kind of sucks that we just came from a great tier set as Disc Priests. If we came from like a very lackluster tier set to this one, it would feel great. Like this rework would feel great and like all pluses. But the problem is that we just came from the instant radiances, and and you can feel it. It hurts. And then the other con that I'm going to list for Discipline Priest is Smite Spam. Now, I personally really do enjoy having Smite Spam being more viable. However, it does get a little repetitive just how viable it is. I feel like when you're in your Shadow Covenant, your Smite Spam is your filler, and it resets your whichever, like if you take Shadow Fiend or your Mindbender, it'll reset that cooldown, but it just feels a little too repetitive. Like maybe if it was just viable during your Shadow Covenant, that would be cool because it works with your tier set. Now your smites are basically duplicated on the target, but a shadow version hits them as well. Your smites extend your atonements, but only one, and then if you're in your Shadow Covenant, only two of them, and only by a little. But it just feels like since you're having to extend those atonements with smite spam outside of your Shadow Covenant, it did get a little repetitive. But all of that cancels out. All these cons cancel out just by how cool Uppies is. So, guys, that's going to do it for this video. I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed me kind of running through what I noticed were the pros and cons of each healer. Let me know if any of these pros are exciting you about a heal spec. Hopefully I kind of excited you like, oh, I didn't think about that for that healer. That's kind of the purpose of this video. Or I don't want to turn you off of a healer. Like if you don't want to put up with mana problems as a shaman, I don't want to turn you off because there are ways around that. Like nature swiftness and, just not playing the chain heal build is fine. There are ways around all of these cons, and they're just things that I noticed, and I've heard a couple of them from the communities of the respective classes. But regardless, I want to say thank you for watching this video and showing me so much support, especially to these guys on screen. These are my Patreons. If you see your name on the screen, thank you for pushing this channel as far as it's come today. And if you have the means to support the channel through Patreon or just want to see your name on the screen like these guys, then check out the link down in the description below to my Patreon by subscribing so you don't miss any future content like this or any future guides or simplified beginner's guides like my most recent video, the Mistweaver one, in the future. And then liking this video. If you liked it and want more people to see it, then trick the algorithm and hit that like button and go ahead and leave a comment down below what you guys think so that more people see my video, since that's how the YouTube algorithm works. I'm sure you guys have heard that a billion times by now. But guys, thank you so much for all the support lately. I really appreciate it. I'm so close to 3,700 subscribers. I never saw this coming, and I'm not going to stop anytime soon. So make sure you're subscribed so you join me along this wild ride that YouTube's been for me lately. But guys, thank you so much. I'll see you in the next one. I really hope I didn't make any enemies with this video. But until then, I'll see you guys next time. Take care.